Let's talk cams. My name's James, and I'm going to enjoy a cigar while we have a discussion about cams for Harley Milwaukee 8. When I started to buy a cam for my bike, and by the way, I've got a 2020 Road Glide. This is mine. It's River Rock Gray. My wife has a 2020 Road Glide. It's right here. It's black. When I started looking into doing cams for our bikes, I realized pretty fast there's a lot of options out there. It's confusing, very confusing. And then you go to forums, and forums are great places to get information, but gosh, there's a lot of opinions. And a majority of the people don't know what they're talking about. It's just, this is the one my buddy's buddy told me to get, and he works on bikes and he knows what he's talking about. You see that a lot. So everybody's got an opinion on something. And a lot of times these opinions are subjective. They're based off of personal experience. And your personal experience may not be the same as mine. Your subjective opinion may not be the same as mine. So the more I looked for opinions, the more confused I got. And the next thing, you go to YouTube, a lot of good information, helped me out tremendously. But one of my pet peeves is people who give opinions with no data. So you'll hear someone say, oh, brand X, it's the best cam. It's the best cam. Best cam for what? Best cam for you? Best cam for me? Best cam for everybody? Why is it best cam? So you got to be careful just going off people's opinion. You take it, you listen to it, you analyze it. So I decided I was going to do a little research myself. In this video, I want to share some of that research with you and what I've learned. I'm by no means a cam expert. I'm not. Don't claim to be, but I've learned a few things to where I understand them, and maybe I can share something with somebody that might help them. My goal here is not to drive you to a certain cam. My goal here is not to convince you to think like I think. My goal here is to make you ask specific questions so that you get the best cam for your driving style. That's my goal. What are those questions? What cam fits my driving style? What is my driving style? And what things are important to me? So let's start through a couple of those. You've got some riders that they're just balls to the wall, wide open. 3,500, 4,500 and up RPMs. Then you've got some riders who don't necessarily ride in the RPM range. They're more cruisers. Some of these ride 2 up. And they've got big touring packs on their back and on the back of the bike, and they're in mountains. I live in Tennessee, so we have a lot of mountains. So if you're riding 2 up in Tennessee in some of these mountains and you're coming into turns, you're lugging the bike. You can get your RPMs down 1,700, 1,800. Then ease out of a curve and you take off. Well, that's low in torque. You want a bike that has a cam set up for low in torque, creating torque right off a throttle in low RPM situations. That's the cam you want to be a torque cam in that driving style situation. In that situation, you would not want an S&S 475. Well, that thing's going to be a turd down low. It's not designed for that. Now, if you don't care about that, and you don't care to gear down, and all you want's upper end, then something like an S&S 475, and there's other cams. By all means, I'm not pushing the S&S 475. I'm saying that style of cam designed for the upper end would be better for those type riders. And I'm not covering every cam in this video. There's a lot of cams that I'm not even talking about. So ask yourself, what type of driving do you do? Where do we spend most of our time driving? Get on your motorcycle and look at where you spend most of your time. I think you spend most of your time 2,500 to 4,000 RPMs. That's where you spend most of your time, cruising. So, first you have to ask yourself, do I want a low-end torque cam? Do I want a higher end? Now, that doesn't mean that just because a cam's a low-end torque cam, it's not still good on the upper end compared to stock. It's way better. Or conversely, the other way. Anything's going to be an improvement over stock. The next thing I had to ask myself, probably, well, it was very important, probably important to a lot of you, is that lope at idle. Yeah, you know that sound I'm talking about, that romp, that lope, that chop. So what causes the lope? The lope is caused by overlap. What's overlap? That's a good cigar. Overlap is caused when the intake valve and exhaust valve are open simultaneously. And I'll teach you how to calculate overlap. So you can take a cam specs. You can go look up a cam that you like. You can pull up its specs, and you can tell if it's going to have a lot of lope or minimal to no lope. I wanted a fair amount. I like that sound. The cam I have has about 28 degrees of overlap. And we'll look at some numbers and put that in perspective. 28 degrees of overlap. A stock cam has 0. So that's a lot. Now let's put that in perspective. An S&S 475 has like 30-something degrees of overlap. 34. We'll get into the numbers here in a minute. But I wanted to know what caused that so that I could choose a cam that had a lot of lope, but also had the driving style that I was looking for. So we'll look at some numbers here on the computer. And what I didn't dyno these bikes. So take that for what it's worth. I studied the internet and looked for places that had a lot of good data. And a place I found was Fuelmoto. And I'm not pushing Fuelmoto. I am not sponsored by them. They've given me nothing. I've dealt with Fuelmoto. They've been good to me, good to do business with. So take that for what it's worth. But they do have a lot of good information on their website. And what I was looking for was an apples to apples comparison. I don't care what the final numbers are. That's subjective. What I wanted to know was if you took the same bike on the same dyno with the same mods and the only variable was changing the cam, how do those compare to each other? And I found some dyno charts, the same bike on the same dyno with the only variable being the cam changed out. So I took their dyno charts and I put those numbers into an Excel table under various RPM ranges so that we could look at those and compare the cams. So we can compare one down low and up in the middle and up high. And that's what we're going to take a look at here in a minute. And as promised, we're going to take a look at some numbers. Let's start with some cam specs with a few of these cams. And again, this is not the end-all be-all. I've just picked a few. We've got a 107 and 114, stock 117, S&S 475, Redshift 468, Wood 22XD, Wood 22XE, and then two Screaming Eagles, a 462 and a 498. I learned something myself looking at this. I knew a 107 and a 114 had the same cam, but I didn't realize a 117 had a different cam. Of course, it is a larger displacement, so maybe that makes a little bit of sense. Different opening, closing times for the exhaust and intake. Different duration and maximum lift. So what does a cam do? There's a lot of cam does, but a couple of things here you first look at. Valve lift, duration. How far does it open that valve? How long does it keep it open? That's duration. How far it opens, it's maximum valve lift. Why is that important? Well, you have to have oxygen, air, to burn fuel. Two components to make power. If you want to increase the fuel, you have to increase the air. So if you have a valve that opens just a small amount versus a valve that opens a large amount, well, yeah, you're going to get more air in. Now you have a valve that opens and stays open longer than another, you're going to get more air in. So let's look at the stock 107 and 114. You're talking about a three average between the two. This is intake, this is exhaust. And it's not uncommon for those to be slightly different. So you're averaging about 360. So on intake, it's got a 350 lift. Look at the 117. It's a 432 lift. That kind of shocked me. That's quite a bit more lift than a stock 107 or 114. So I was a little bit impressed by that. Duration, 174, 199, 188, 212. So as you can see, the 117 opens further and it stays open longer. So what do we got when we get down into the aftermarket cams? Now we get into 200 duration. We're getting quite a bit more. You can see the lift is, a lot higher. So now we're at a S&S 475's at a 475 lift. The Red Shift 468's at a 470, and a Wood 22XD and XC are both 470. Now a little note here. This is about as high as you want to go on stock springs. So for the purpose of this video, stock heads, you don't want to be looking at cams over 475. These people that get into these 500 lift, 525, 550, they're doing head work as well. If not, the springs are not going to handle it. You're going to get valve float. So stay at 475 and below. Your stock is 350 lift. 475 lift's pretty big. So that's where you want to stay, 475 and below. We talked about overlap, so I want to show you a little bit about overlap. Overlap, this right here, is what makes that romp or lope at idle. This is what gives that good sound that everybody likes. When people say, oh, that's hitting a lick, well, what they're talking about is that romp or lope at idle. And it's overlap. I mentioned earlier that overlap is when the intake valve and the exhaust valve are open at the same time. So the way you calculate overlap is you take your intake opening time and you add it to your exhaust closing time. So I did it right here for the S&S 472. Intake opening 6.2, exhaust closing 28.5. It's 34.7. I rounded it up to 35. So as you can see, 35 overlap. That's big. And go listen to an S&S 475. They're pretty impressive. They hit a pretty good lick. But the Red Shift and Wood Cam 22XD they're both 28. So I chose the Wood 22XD, and 28 is it's pretty good. And so is the Red Shift, the S&S 475, of course, it's got one of the highest overlaps of a cam that I've seen with a 475 lift. So you're not going to get one that's really got more overlap than the S&S 475. Now this can cause some issues tuning down low with this much overlap, but most of the tuners out there know how to deal with this, and it's not a problem. So this is a really high overlap cam. Let me put in a video here of my wife's bike and my bike. The first video is my bike. It's going to be the Wood 22XD with 28 overlap. The second video is my wife's bike, Red Shift 468, with a 28 overlap as well. So I'll let you hear our two bikes right here. Okay. So that gives you an idea of what 28 overlap sounds like. And if you want to hear a S&S 475, just go do a search on YouTube and you'll find plenty of videos of that. I'm not going to get too much into this part for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm not the guy to be explaining this. Cams can be they're quite interesting to me, the science that goes into them. But I'll just touch on the surface a little bit. So I'm not going to do the 107, 117. They have negative openings, so that's just going to confuse things. I can explain that later. Let's go to a S&S 475. So basically the intake opening, what this says is this valve is going to open 6.2 degrees before top dead center. So imagine that piston coming up before it gets to top dead center at 6.2 degrees before. This valve starts opening, pulling in air. And then piston comes on up and does its rotation. And then this says it closes at 27 degrees after top dead center. Well, now you come through your rotation, your combustion, and you got your exhaust opening up 55.5 degrees before bottom dead center. And then that valve closes 28 degrees after top dead center. So we talked about overlap being your intake and your exhaust valve open at the same time. Well, let's look at this one. This thing starts opening at 6.2 on the S&S 475, 6.2 degrees before top dead center. Well, the exhaust doesn't close until 28 degrees after top dead center. So that's why you add these together. So when this opens, this exhaust valve is already open right here because it opened 55 degrees before bottom dead center, and it stays open until after top dead center. So when this valve opens at 6.2 before top dead center, this exhaust is already open, and it stays open until 28 degrees after top dead center. So that's why you add these two together to get your overlap, which is the time that your intake valve and exhaust valve are open simultaneously. So there you go. For what it's worth, that gives you a little idea of overlap. You can go out and calculate your own overlap. Just add your intake opening to your exhaust closing, and boom, you got your overlap number. The higher the number, the more lope at idle, but this gives you some perspective. Stock has 0. RS 468 and the Wood 22XD have 28. The S&S has 35. Your Screaming Eagle 462 has a 9 overlap, and the 498 has an 11 overlap. So, Screaming Eagle stuff is usually more conservative. Now, as far as torque, you can see a difference. This is a torque cam. This is a low-end torque cam, Redshift 468. S&S is a high-end, balls-to-the-wall, high-end cam, okay? Well, look at the difference. There's a difference in when they open and close. A Redshift, well, here, I'll show you something. Redshift even said this in one of their displays. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Torque cams trap pressure, raising the cranking compression, and produce earlier torque with a more responsive throttle. Horsepower cams produce less cranking compression, a softer early torque curve, and an easier to launch setup with higher RPM. So you're going to have some differences between the two. The Redshift is a torque cam. It opens before the S&S does, so it can start compressing. And it closes before the S&S does. Well, it's taking that air in faster. It's getting the valve closed. It's compressing it. So you're getting the lower end torque. This is more of an upper end. This one, the Wood 22XD, is the one I got. And I really like the cam, and I'll talk about it more a little later. So let's look at torque numbers for just a minute for these particular cams. And again, remember, this is not about promoting one of these cams. It's about showing apples to apples comparison of what you should be asking yourself when you purchase a cam. Do I want low? You can see here, I've highlighted this section as low end. Do I want medium? Do I want high end? Now, usually what you'll get something like this, a cam that's good from here to here, or a cam that shines from here to here. Okay? So you could get a good low end, good mid, and good upper, but you can't get all three. It's just not possible. A cam's going to be designed one way or the other. Now, that's not to say that one of these cams, like the 468 we keep talking about, it being a good low end cam. That's not to say that this cam is not great on the upper end. It's way better than stock. It just doesn't compare to like a high end cam, like a S&S 475 or a Wood 22XD. So, and conversely, doesn't mean that when you buy a high-end cam, it's going to be extremely awful down. Well, let me take that back. Let's look at some numbers here. I want to show you something. A stock bike makes its torque immediately at 2,500 RPMs. And if you'll notice, from the time it makes its torque, it just dies off. The horsepower does the same thing. Got to remember, there's a red line, a rev limiter about 5,600 on these bikes. So anything after 5,500 on a stock bike is dead. Well, look at these aftermarket cams. You change your rev limiter when you run these cams. And the reason this cuts off is it's pretty much a dog after this. There's nothing. It can't pull. It's not pulling. So you got a 107 torque on a stock 114 cam immediately at 2,500. Remember we talked earlier, sometimes you can get down into lugging situations at 1,800 to 2,000 RPMs riding two up in the mountains. Well, yes, you can gear down, or I want to show you something. Stock bike is pretty strong from here to here. 1,800 to 2,500 RPMs, a stock cam is stout. That's what it's designed for. It's a torque cam. Now I want you to look at this Redshift 465. You got 105 and 107 here. Redshift, you got 110 and 125. This is insane. This cam from here to here is, like I said, my wife has this cam. It is absolutely insane on the throttle response in a lugging situation. I can get my bike down in fourth gear to 1,800 and just nail the throttle. And it will bog a little, slowly build, and then it'll hit right in here somewhere, or here to here, and it's gone. Now, her bike, you can bog it down, lug it to about 1,800 RPMs in fourth gear, and as soon as you hit the throttle, this thing's rocket. It's gone. It'll jump out in front of my bike. Under those conditions, it'll jump out in front of my bike at probably 3 bike lengths. That's how fast it takes off. Now, my cam's designed more for up here. It'll come on strong. But down low, if you're riding two up, this Redshift 468 and this 22XE, they're powerhouses down low. I mean, they are torque monsters. You can see the XE doesn't come on as fast, but as soon as you come past 2,000, it's right there with it. And then it actually surpasses it slightly at 3,000. And then it surpasses it at 25, 4. It holds it all the way out. So basically, you could choose either one of these. Maximum torque on the XE is 131, made at 3,000. Maximum torque on the 468 is 130, made at 3,000. Now look in comparison to these other cams. Their maximum torque is made right here. These other cams are not making their maximum torque until 3,500 to 4,000. And they still don't match this. So that's a testament to these cams down low. Now let's look at the 475. The 475 S&S has, at 2,000 RPMs, has less torque than a stock bike by 7 foot-pounds. I mean, in this area right here, the S&S 475 is a turd. I told you earlier, if you're riding two up, you're in mountains and you're lugging the bike, you would not want an SNS 475. Well, here's your proof. This thing is a dog at 2,000 RPMs. Look, at 2,500, it's just now matching a stock bike. So from here to here, the SNS 475 is not the cam for you. Now, we don't do a lot of riding right there. That's a specific scenario, so it just depends on your riding style. However, I want you to watch what happens when you go from 2,500 to 3,000. Look at this red SNS 475. It goes from 108 to 123 in 500 RPMs. This is insane. This bike wants RPM. This cam wants some RPMs, and as soon as you give it RPMs, it's gone. It comes alive. This is insane jump. 108 to 123 immediately. And then, boom, it's up there, and it's gone. So, look at the 22XD. It's 100 at 2,000. The SNS is 98. And then the XD is 114, and this is 108. And the XD is 124 at 3,000, and the SNS is 123. And then 126, 128, 127, 128, and they stay pretty much, except the higher end, it seems like the XD comes back past it. So I chose the Wood 22XD. Got a good sound. It's just as strong as the SNS 475, in my opinion. Now, keep in mind, don't jump in my comments and go crazy and say, oh, I got the SNS 475. It's the greatest thing since a pocket on a shirt. Everybody gets sensitive to what they have. I'm just giving my opinion for what I wanted. The SNS 475 is an outstanding cam. I just chose the XD based off of these numbers. So, that gives you an idea of torque. If you're looking for low-end torque, it's going to be the Redshift 468 and Wood XC. If you're looking at mid, it's going to be the Wood XC and Redshift 468. If you're looking for upper torque, it's the Wood XD and SNS 475. In my opinion, we spend most of our time right here driving. And if you look at this area right here, I don't think there's anything that's going to beat. If you're going to look at this area, then you have to take this area into consideration. And in my opinion, there's nothing that's going to beat overall average the Redshift 468 and the Wood 22XE. These are the strongest from here to here. Now, when you go from here to here, the two strongest are going to be the SNS 475 and the Wood 22XD. So that goes along with what I said here. It just depends on what you're looking for. If you want to drive up here all the time and you want this thing as fast as you can make it, then you probably want the SNS or a Wood 22XD. There's other cams out there. I don't mean to exclude those cams. I'd be glad to look at any of them with you or for you if you got any ideas. But down low, from here to here, torque is where torque counts. Okay? This is where torque counts. This is where horsepower counts. So let's look at some horsepower numbers real fast. Stock bike makes its peak horsepower at 5,000 RPMs. And as I said, it hits 5,500, then it's just flipping a switch. I've always said this about my stock 114, and some of you will understand. And this right here supports it. This low-end power, torque. These bikes, when you get on them, stock 114, they take off like a bat out of hell. And then they just peter down to nothing. They just peter to nothing. Well, these charts kind of show that. And then after 5,500, 5,600, they cut off. So, look at your aftermarket cams. And I've not included too much the Screaming Eagle on this situation because most people are going to do something like this or an Andrews or a Fueling or whoever and don't go with a Screaming Eagle. But now the Screaming Eagle are a lot better than the stock cam, but they're a little more conservative than the other aftermarket cams. But all the cams after the stock cam make their peak power at 5,500 RPMs. The difference is most of these cams just keep pulling to where the stock cam, it's getting shut off. And the reason is it just continues to go down to nothing. You're not getting any, you're not making any progress after 5,500 on a stock cam. So you might as well hit the rev limiter. They do it for many reasons. One of them safety and warranty. But the other reason is you're not producing anything. You're just falling on your face. Here's what's interesting. You can see this 80, 81, 77. This is probably going to be 60, and this would probably be 50 horsepower if it carried on out. So it's down back where it was over here. Watch what happens to the S&S 475. 120, 120, 117. This right here is huge. This area right here with my new Wood 22XD cam is a whole different ball game. I mean, it pulls until the rev limiter is hit. But what I wanted to show you is over here the Redshift 468 and the Wood 22XD were the torque monsters and won the down-low battle. Watch what happens over here. Same thing. You got less horsepower than a stock bike with the S&S 475 at 2,000. You got about the same at 2,500. But at 3,000 RPMs, here's where you start picking up. And then you're off to the races. And right in here is where it gets really, you separate. I mean, you're talking 28 horsepower difference at 4,500. This is insane. So this cam comes on really strong. Now, they all do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, let's look at the Redshift 468 is a torque cam. But even up at high, look what happens compared to a stock bike. 98, 76, 22 horsepower. This is 27 horsepower more than stock. 112, 81, 114, 77, and right here 110 and 108 and 0. Any of these cams are way better than stock. You just have to decide what's more important to you. This range from here to here or this range from here to here. So that kind of gives you an idea of some things you can look at for yourself and make your own decision when you're picking out a cam. Keep in mind 475 lift or below, and you have to ask yourself, do you want something from here to here? Is that priority? Or do you want something from here to here? And that's when you're going to arrive. And don't get me wrong, there's other great cams. I'm not pushing any of these. I told you what I did and what my wife did. She did the 468 and I did the Wood 22XD. But Fueling's got some good cams. S&S 475 is on this list. Andrews. Then there's Star Racing. There's a ton of different cams out there. You just have to go look at those specs for that cam, which you're going to see in this form, and compare them to other cams. Look at your overlap, look at your lift, look at your duration, and then go find dyno charts and see where this cam shines. Does it shine down low and medium? Does it shine medium and upper? So hopefully some of this will help somebody in making a decision that, as far as what's best for them. Okay, so there you go, guys. I hope that was helpful in some way, or at least entertaining in some manner. If you had any questions, put them in the comments below. If I can't answer, I'll let you know. If you liked the video, let me know. If you didn't like the video, let me know. And, hit the subscribe button. This is my first video, second video, and it would help trying to get some more videos out. I think I'm going to do my next video. I've got a video on seat review. I bought the Bad Boy Cycles Freedom Series seat, so you need to look that video up. I've got a video coming out on a NOCO battery tender. Interesting item. So you'll probably want to watch that one too. And I may have one coming out on the Thunder Max tuner for my bike. So You know, maybe some in one of those will interest you. But I appreciate you watching the video, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks.